All right. And welcome to another episode of Sports Business. Let me get rid of this thing here. Let me see here. I'm at the Twitter for Sideline Sports. That's right. And JB's gonna have to handle that here in a little bit. But um but yeah, we are here live. This is Sports Business Insider. I am Denzel Snipes. This is Sean Russey, former MLB and NFL sports agent, and we have a loaded show to you tonight, to where we're going to give a bit of a breakdown on how NBA contracts work. Sean sent some awesome notes. We're going to share it with you guys and have a little education session here as we do every single week. But first, before we get started, just want to ask everybody to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe. And for Sideline Sports, we got a lot of great material. We just went off the air with a confidential episode. That's with JB Ellis and Jason Chartrand. Also, let's go down the list here. The flagship show, Sideline Sports Show, Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sideline Sports Network. We had a great one just last night. That's with host JB Ellis. Rafael Sparza's on there as well as Dave DeRocher and John Shear. Had a great episode last night. We had a beautiful debate about AB versus Megatron. Who was better? Some of you out there saw my post on Facebook. Some of you all engaged. Some of you actually tuned into the episode as well and engaged as well. Appreciate you guys for that. And we also remember the life and career of the late Jacoby Jones, who unfortunately passed away on July the 14th. And we also had a plethora of other stuff that we talked about. You know, sometimes it gets a little off the rails, but I promise you it's entertaining. Also, we got Top Rope Talk Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Silent Sports Network. That's with myself, the wrestling professor Billy Cruz. Rafael Esparza shows up on there too. Usually he shows up on preview shows for premium live events to talk about betting odds and such. And then also Tyler tends to appear on there as well, Tyler Ingham. So really great show. Awesome entertainment for the masses as far as AEW, WWE, you name it. All pro wrestling all the time. Also, you got Hawk Talk, which actually will return next week. That's with Dave DeRocher and Walt Thurman III, the Legion of Boom Zone. That's on Tuesdays at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time on the Sideline Sports Network. All Seattle Seahawks all the time. They've had 12 fans on there. They've had Hall of Famer Steve Largent was on the show. Then I went on and I met Steve Largent at the Super Bowl week back in February. It was awesome. Great show. If you're a Hawks fan, most definitely tune in. Hey, even if you're a 49ers fan and you hate the Hawks, tune in anyway, just so you can talk trash in the comments, okay? Any engagement is better than no engagement. You hear me? And that's about our lineup. And we're gonna have and then also, of course, there is the gauntlet. We will be back on the air in a couple of weeks. This is the time period of the year where NFL news is just a tad slow, but we got spring training in session. We're going to have the Hall of Fame game coming up here in about 2 weeks with my Houston Texans taking on the Chicago Bears. We're going to have preseason. Then, of course, the regular season gauntlet. We'll be back on the air. That's myself, Dom DeRubis, James Tatum, and JJ Jenkins. We're going to be back. That's going to be on Friday nights at 7 p.m. Central, so 8 p.m. Eastern. We go by Eastern. You guys know what time. 8 p.m. Eastern, Silent Sports Network, and also on James Tatum 12's YouTube. All right. Woo, I just did 3 minutes worth of promos. Let's go ahead and get this started because I'm sure Sean is just dying to talk here about NBA contract breakdown, man. We're gonna talk about Sean's kind of sitting there like, what are all these shows, man? What's going on? But here's something that he does know very, very well, and that's breaking down a contract and how it goes because he didn't been to school for this. He didn't represent it. Whatever it is they got to go through. If they got to go through a sports agent, ranger school, a sniper school, or whatever it is, he had to go through to learn this. This is what he did, okay? So tell us a little bit about NBA contract breakdowns. I understand here is the NBA two-way contract and how that works. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, how's it going, boss? And like you said, news is kind of slow, so we figured we will fill the gap in here a little bit, do an educational show this week. So we'll start with the two-way contracts, and the two-way contracts is something has really made the G League more valuable because I think at first when the G League was kind of inceptive, it really wasn't looked at as something where there was a lot of guys coming up that it wasn't really like a feeder system for the NBA. And because you could put the guys down there unprotected, it was kind of like you definitely didn't want to put even your second round pick down there if you thought he was going to be anything, because then another team was going to come grab him. What these two-way contracts have done is allow teams, kind of like the NFL practice squad, where they can protect guys every week. They can essentially carry three extra players on two-way contracts.
Right on.
Those two-way guys can play, on both, in the NBA and in the G League, simultaneous during that season. There is some limits on games played. They can be active for 50 games, or a combined 90 if the team is not satisfactory to a 15-man roster. So the team can actually get penalized if they're carrying 14 guys and not be able to use their G League guys for as many games as, say, a team that is carrying the full 15 at all times. But like I said, I think that really it's helped the G League be more successful. You've seen teams now put first rounders down there and let them essentially red shirt their rookie season. And I think it's good for the development of the league that these guys, some of these guys that are getting drafted, even, obviously at a very young age, don't get thrown to the fire when clearly, the ceiling is there, but it's not ready, when they first get drafted, and the G League is finally there to develop some of these people.
Right on. And that's pretty interesting how they can be added. It's kind of like the like minor league baseball, essentially, how you could just kind of call somebody up to the main roster mid-season. That's one of the features of the contract. And do I have the right comparison there?
Yeah, and that's a great comparison because MLB teams have limited numbers of options and call ups they can do of a player. This is that same thing, right? You can use the guy for 50 games essentially, or combine 90 over the three guys you have down there if you're not in 15-man compliance. So I think it's a good way, like I said, where you bounce up and down. But if you have a key injury and you don't want to go sign, say, a 10-day contract veteran off the street, you bring your G League guy up maybe for 7 or 10 games, and then you bump him down, and you still have 40 games where you can call up the other guys when necessary.
Right, right, absolutely. And so we've also got exceptions and rights, as is to everything. Mid-level exceptions, and then also bird rights, if you want to touch in on that.
Yeah, so the mid level has been around for some time, and it's usually used by teams that are over the cap. It's kind of, I don't want to call it a gift, but it really is. It's saying, here, you're over the cap, but we'll still let you use this amount to go sign a veteran player. And if you're over the cap, you can only use 5.2 million of mid level exception. If you're under the cap, you can use a mid level exception of 12.8. Now the nice thing about this is it doesn't have to be on one guy. You could
Right
split
on.
it among two, three guys. I think most recently that the Heat have used their MLE to re-sign Kevin Love. Um, and you usually see it signed, used signed by veterans. Back in the day, it was Karl Malone and Gary Payton signing those deals with the Lakers. Those
Hmm.
were on the MLE. And if you don't use the MLE, you can also use what they call the biannual exception. Now you can't use both. The NBA makes sure you can't circumvent. You can't use both. It's basically one or the other. And the biannual you can only use once every third season, essentially. And that's only a $4.7 million contract. So you get a little bit less of a cap hit if you decide to take a biannual exception with a player. But that does eliminate your ability during that season to even take the mid-level exception towards somebody else. And like I said, a lot of those guys, what you see is the guys that get it is the veterans, the 6-7 years guys that are, good role players, but probably haven't done enough to get a 4 or 5 year contract, but have done enough to get this 2 year mid-level exception contract.
Okay, and then also bird rights. For example, a team can exceed the cap to re-sign its own free agents at max amount, so they can actually re-sign them to the max.
And this, it's actually named after the Celtics. When free agency first came around, they were the first team to exceed the cap to seed their players. So it got named after, the famous Larry Bird of the Celtics. Um,
Hmm.
but this is something the NBA's come up with. This was the first solution of many that they've come up with over, say, the last 25 years to try and keep small markets competitive. The bird rights essentially means, your player can only be signed by you at X amount. And if they leave you, they're going to sacrifice some money because no other team owns the bird rights and can max them out at the same deal that his home team can max him out as. Jason Tatum's a great example. If he left the Celtics, I believe the max deal he could have gotten was $287 million. The
So he
deal he
made
got
more
with
by
the
staying, of
Celtics,
course.
by staying, he got $315 million.
There you
So
go.
it's a huge hit for the player to leave. Obviously, there has to be a lot going on for a player to give up that substantial amount, or maybe it's the point in a career where they're willing to sacrifice that amount. But in the points in Tatum's career, where he's just hitting year 8, year 9, he's really just hitting his prime. To give up that to potentially go, maybe just chase a childhood dream and go play with the Suns where he's from, or go play with the Lakers, who he always dreamed of playing about. That's not the time right now to give up the extra 40 million that he gets by staying with the Celtics with his bird rights and his max contract rights. You know,
Okay.
the
Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, and the one thing that is tied to bird rights is 3 seasons with the same team. So you can earn bird rights with new teams if you stay consecutive seasons, or play 2 of the previous seasons, and then the team can either offer you 105% of the average player's salary in the league for the prior season, or a
Mhm.
175% raise on that player's specific previous salary, whichever is greater. They can't choose the lesser one. They have to offer the player whichever is greater.
Okay, then. And then also, rookie deals. Let's see here. So I mean, first round picks and second round picks, and then there's different tiers as well. Of course, first round picks will typically get like the most in a rookie deal because they were first rounders, and then just like it goes on down depending upon what round you got drafted. So second round or depending on where you got drafted, should I say, where you got drafted in the first or even the second round. Because I mean, let's face it, if you're a top five pick in the first round, you're going to get more than the ones that were selected in the lower round, and then same for second round. But go ahead.
Yeah, so just like the NFL, the NBA contracts are slotted. So the first round pick this year will he signs his deal will be roughly around 57 million in total value. The number 30 pick will be around 12.8 million. Those are slotted, and
Hmm.
teams must offer 80% of the slot. Most teams actually offer the max, which is 120% of the slot. And that's just been common practice. And what that allows is the teams are then helping the cap increase the next season, helping the rookie cap increase the next season by giving those max 120% slots each year. Now, second round picks are completely different. That's completely up to team discretion. Now, most second round picks are minimum, unguaranteed deals. You have to make the roster type thing, just like an NFL seventh rounder, pretty much. Um, but like we saw with Bronny James, he got a guaranteed contract. Obviously, we know there's a little more pull there. There's other politics going on there, but that's very uncommon for a second round pick to get a multi-year contract like that with guarantees. That's not the common practice for second round picks, but that is where the NBA has gone different than other sports, in terms of lowering the scale as you go through each round. They're hands off in the second round, and it's completely team discretion, which is very interesting.
Okay, and then let's see here. Players between 7 to 10 years can qualify. Oh, okay, okay, here we go. No, no, no. It's max contracts here. Different tiers of max contracts. Now there are parameters for those with less than 7 years of service, and between 7 and 10 years of service. If you want to touch upon that.
Yeah, so this kind of came up when Derrick Rose was first coming up on his end of his rookie deal. They used to be where you could only get 25%. Now, if you were after year 4, now just kind of like a 7-year guy, you can get the full 30% of the team's cap.
Right on.
Um, if you're in year 4 when you do the extension, it's kind of like what we've seen with these NFL guys getting extensions earlier and not taking the risk. Guys could take the extension in year 3 in the NBA, but they would only be allowed to get up to 25% of the cap. If they waited to that 4th year, and the same benchmarks that applied to the supermax that we talked about last week in terms of all NBA and things like that, they could get in that 30% of the cap in that 4th season, which is what Derrick Rose signed with the Bulls, and his first extension was the full 30% max of the cap.
Mhm.
And again, that kind of came around because of Derrick Rose, because obviously at that time the bird rights and things, they were not going to equal his value, and they kind of came up where this is where the supermax started to kind of develop.
Okay. All right then. And then lastly, NBA salaries. So Stephen Curry. Wait. Okay. So I'm seeing here highest base is Stephen Curry at 55.8 million a year. What is Jason Tatum's? What is his?
So Jason Tatum's actually won't kick into 2025, 2026, where he'll balloon to 62.8. This year, I believe he's in the 40 to 45 range, but
Because he's still
his
on his
full,
old deal technically.
yep, his full extension will not kick into next season. So the highest average annual value for this season is actually his teammate Jalen Brown at 57.1, but that includes bonuses and incentives, where Curry's base salary starts at 55.8,
Ah.
fully guaranteed. And then, like I said, Tatum will get the new record, like we talked about. He signed the highest record deal recently. He will have the highest annual average value of the NBA next season at 62.8.
8 million. Okay, gotcha. Yep, it would. And then lastly, other notes on NBA salaries. Says here it said they'll leave a team with the power to retain a player after a certain season on their contract. So a 3-year deal with a team option for a fourth. The only other part of NBA contracts not guaranteed are bonuses for performance or achievements. Pretty much like anywhere else, like an NFL contract, they get an incentive for a double-digit sack season or throwing for X amount of yards or whatnot. But anything else you want to share on that one?
Yeah, so this is the only part, like you said, this is the only part of the contract's not guaranteed is where it's a team option. Because player option, you can pretty much guarantee he's gonna opt in, especially if he's had a bad season, he's gonna opt in and take his money. But the team option is essentially the only part of these deals that are not guaranteed. Even if a player gets injured, retired, traded, a team is on the hook for a long time.
Oh,
And we'll go down just some recent examples of teams that have gone over the cap for years to try to satisfy their stars, and then ended up, some of them are just coming out of that salary cap hell now. Orlando during the Dwight Howard era, they gave contracts to Vince Carter, Gilbert Arenas, the aging veterans that they gave contracts to over the cap and mid-level exceptions goes on and on. They end up trading Dwight. They're literally just getting out of that now. Aaron
yeah.
Aflalo was also a part of that Dwight Howard era. He was on Orlando's books to 2022.
Woo.
It's almost like it's not as bad as Bobby Bonilla and Ken Griffey and these guys in baseball getting paid 25, 30 years after they've played their last at bat, right? But it hampers your team for years. Houston post T Mac and Yao, the
Yeah.
Wizards with Wall and Beal, the most recent version of the Nets that is now, obviously we know they're bottom feeders right now, trying to rebuild after KD, Kyrie, and Harden kind of did not work out there. Golden State is right on the cusp of it. Right now we're seeing it with Thompson leaving and them kind of replacing him with veterans that are obviously not to his talent level and going to do 2 or 3 guys by committee to try and replace his statistics. And this is what you see these teams start to go through that made those large championship windows, but they also tried to build around 1 or 2 guys. And obviously there's no reason not to build around Dwight Howard, Stephen Curry, et cetera, et cetera. But they lost track of the cap at some point and stopped forgetting about forgot a little bit about developing versus how many aging veterans can we bring in and how many contracts are we getting out. And then the NBA, those end up being bad deals at the end of the day. I think, in terms of other teams, you're going to look at doing that in terms of forced rebuilds now. I think you're looking at the Phoenix Suns very close.
Oh,
KD's at the end of his run here. I
yeah.
don't think Beal is the same guy he is, and I think you're going to see Booker look to get out of there in a couple of years.
Wow. Well, but like maybe 2 years or what?
I think like 2, because I don't think Durant's gonna. I think you got another year or 2 of Durant, and I think once Durant leaves, you got another season of Booker before he looks to make his exit.
Man, you talk about the era of almost. Is it? It's like they hit their peak when they went up 2-0 on the Bucks in the NBA Finals.
No, and it's almost like, and I hate to put this label on him, but it's the curse of Chris Paul. He kind of left the Clippers in shambles. He's about to leave the Suns in
Suns
shambles.
in shambles.
You
Yep.
know?
Yeah. Well, he just signed with the Spurs, and he can't necessarily leave them in shambles
Nope.
because they're
All
already
he
a
can do is
rebuilding
be a
team.
mentor.
Yep. And they're already a
He is.
rebuilding team. So there you go.
It reminds me of Vince Carter going to the Mavericks and the Hawks. Now they understand more. Like, hey, we're a little bit past being able to be a serious contributor, past a mentor. In terms of being on a championship contender, especially with the injuries they've both had. And, I think it's a good spot for him. And like I said, there will be no talk this year about his playoff curse. The Spurs won't really be a threat, I don't think.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, yeah. I mean, at least probably not for the next couple of years. I mean, I expect Wimby to have another monster year, but at the end of the day, I mean, they're in the same division as well. Memphis is going to be well. New Orleans is still oh man, I was at a
And they
loss for
just got
words.
DeJounte
New
Murray.
Orleans. New Orleans, yeah, they just got the Junction Murray and everything. New Orleans looking to creep up into the playoff picture past the play in. Then you got Memphis, Ja Morant coming back. We'll see how that works out. And then you also got, an up and coming Houston, and then you got Dallas who won the West. So it's gonna be that work's cut
Yeah.
out for him in San Antonio.
Houston was one of the hottest teams to end the regular season last year, and I think obviously depending how they start, but the confidence they're going to have carried over, I think is going to be a big boost in terms of the slow start they faced last year compared to what they'll start like this year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everybody, thanks for hanging with us. We had a nice little educational 20-minute episode. Of course, thanks to my guy Sean Russey for breaking down everything. And this has been Sports Business Insider. Tune in next week where we're gonna have some more for you all for the masses. So for Sean Russey, I'm Denzel Snipes. We will see you all next